Hello and welcome to the EcoBiz show where you can get ideas to grow your business and make it greener. And today I'm joined by Joe Heneker of Sustainable Consulting, and we're talking about making your business more sustainable through small, repeatable and buildable changes. So welcome, Joe. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So a bit of introduction. Joe likes to use UN Sustainable Development Goals to help others find a business's best focus, so they can channel their efforts into making positive change for their community and the planet. So we'll launch straight into the questions. How can a business channel their efforts into making positive change for the community and planet?
Well, I think for me, and it can relate to individuals as well as businesses, it's about really being clear about your purpose as a business. So why do you do what you do? If you're a founder, that's why did you set your organization up? And if you work for a bigger organization, it's, well, why do I go to work every day? And I know it's about paying the bills. That's really important. But actually, there's a bit more to it, isn't there? It's what ignites that fire in your belly and that passion to do what you do. So I think that's the first thing, is that purpose. Then I think it's really important, before you rush off and do loads of actions, it's about defining what sustainability means to your organization. And that is really linked to purpose. And it helps with scope, and it helps to channel your energy as well. Because otherwise you can get caught up in so many exciting things that you start loads of stuff and perhaps don't finish many of them, which is something I think we're all guilty of. Yeah. I really like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You can see sort of half of them there behind me.
Yeah.
Not to get into the detail of all the targets and the actions around them, but if you talk to someone about those 17 goals, someone, one of them will ignite that passion. I think you go, oh yeah, that one's really important to me because I work in a very male-dominated environment. Or, oh yes, I had an experience growing up, which means that zero hunger is really important to me. So there is always something, I believe, that will be something that's part of who you are. So I like to try and find what those goals are, because I think if you find those goals, you're more likely to act upon them. It's going to feel less of a chore and actually more of something that you just really want to do because it's part of who you are. I think it's also really easy to get caught up in the flavor of the week. Sustainability is so vast. Everyone gets really excited about the latest subject. And if we take the summer, we could take all the subjects in COP this week. But I think an easier example is over the summer, we had quite a hefty drought here in the UK. So everyone started talking about what we could do to save water and how we had to change our water behaviour, which is, of course, really important. But a lot of people switched to water, sort of dropped what they were doing before the drought started. So they didn't necessarily finish what they were committed to doing before and moved on to the next thing. And of course, it's now raining. Everyone's stopped worrying about water, which is human nature. So I think it's about really picking that focus and sticking with it despite all the noise and distractions, because what you want to do is achieve something, finish something, really make a difference, and then actually shout about it, brag about it, because you've done something amazing. So for me, that's how I think it can become positive, because you achieve, you do, and then you feel proud of yourself, which is part of human nature.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's a bit like sort of building a bridge, isn't it? It's make sure that you cross all the way over, get that done, and then you can actually travel back over that bridge and get help to keep that.
Yeah, absolutely. Bang on. I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I always love that analogy, because it's like, if you only build halfway across, you're never going to get there, and you can't make that a circular thing, and you can't make it sustainable. So,
no.
Yeah, it's a really good idea.
I'm going to use that now. Thank you.
I'll see if I can find the exact example I came across years ago, because it was brilliant. Such a good way of putting it, and you can use it for all sorts of situations. So how can businesses become more sustainable through small, repeatable and buildable changes?
Well, the first thing to do, I think it's worth taking a moment wherever you sit in an organization to reflect upon what that organization is doing and how it's being done. So what you do, how you do it. If you're really lucky and you have time and resource, which most of us don't have a lot of at the moment, given current climate, take a moment to benchmark your carbon footprint, and then use that data to focus on one or two ways to reduce it. If that's a bit tricky, park that, although there are people that can help. Of course, that is you have to spend money to do that, right? So if you don't know where to start with that, start by looking at, I think, where you spend your money. as an organization, as a business. You could be a coffee shop where you're spending a lot on coffee supplies. It could be on packaging. But whatever it is, work through those one at a time to see if there's any way that you could find a more sustainable option, whether that's fair trade coffee, plastic-free packaging. That's something you can do. Now, some of those things might cost a little bit more, that's true. But say you're quite a small organization that's sending a lot of stuff through the post with couriers, and you're based in a business park, you may have neighbours who are just chucking away the packaging they receive once they've received it. But actually what you could do, as just a very easy example, is say, well, can I have that? And I'll use that then to send it on. You're extending the life of that packaging. You're doubling at least its life. That will save you a bit of cash, hopefully, because you're having to spend less. You're saving that company recycling costs. And you may have found a new sort of friend in town that you can start working with on other initiatives. So it's threefold. It's cost. It's for both people. It's maybe a bit of environmental impact as well, and also a bit of community. So those are things that I would look at. I'd also say don't feel panicked into trying to do everything at once, which is something we feel because this is such a massive, scary subject, right? I must do everything. Don't. If you use a lot of water in your business, work on that first. If you work somewhere with very little diversity, start working on that as your focus. Pick a couple of things where you feel like you can make a difference and see some positive progress quite quickly. And I think Mr. Strudels, who was on a podcast a few weeks ago with his pasta straw, was saying something quite similar, actually. Small, repeatable changes, and make it fun if you can as well. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I actually had him on my show last year.
Yeah, I saw that one, and that was the.
Yeah. So yeah, that was, and I mean, yeah, they've stuck with it, and they've really, what seemed a very simple business model, and yet, it's done so well. So yeah, they're a great example of how you can really go far. And this comes down to then sort of how can we avoid overwhelm and inaction, because there's often all these big scary stories out there, and and people feel overwhelmed that they should be doing everything. How can they avoid that?
Yeah, so I feel really passionate about this, actually. The media does need to report the scary stories. It has a duty of care towards us, I guess. But actually, I feel like quite often it's quite irresponsible. It's a bit sort of clickbait headlines, and it is frankly quite scary and overwhelming. And I think there's a fine line to tread between telling people the truth without glossing over stuff, which we need to hear. But there's not enough about positive news stories, success stories, things people have done. And I really believe that's quite irresponsible. I think if you, what am I trying to say? I guess just reading all that scary stuff, you're like an ostrich. Well, there's nothing I can do about it. Or I don't really think my little bit of recycling at home or in my small business can help. What can I do? Those massive companies, those governments aren't doing anything. So what's the point? And I don't know where to start. So do you know what? I'm going to put on the telly and worry about it another day, whatever. And I really, really believe that the media has a role to play in starting to change the narrative. If we could read about small businesses or tiny community schemes helping one or two people, maybe they never help more than one or two people, but that doesn't matter. Maybe they grow and they become implemented in various communities across the world, potentially. People start to feel empowered, going, well, they did that. I've got an idea that even if it just helps 2 or 3 people, that's okay. That could be me. We could do that at our work. We could help that problem that I've seen reflected in my local community, or whatever. How positive is that? Why would you choose one giant corporate scheme that's expensive to implement when actually you can do a really small idea that anyone can repeat and get involved with? And I think the people power element of this is immense and underestimated, and it doesn't have to be some fancy grand scheme that one of the big corporates is doing. So that's sort of, I guess that's my rant, if you like, but I'm quite passionate about that one, in case you couldn't see.
Yeah, brilliant, really good. And so how, if people want to start, where do people start? What do you offer that you can help people?
So it goes back to identifying your individual purpose and your professional purpose. Don't race off and start something without thinking about the why. So that's really important. And if a business makes a sustainable change, it kind of needs to fit with its story that way, and I really hate the word authentic, but I'm going to use it anyway. It feels authentic, it's real, and it's legit. Because if you start talking about something that you don't really believe in, it's pretty obvious. So, so I think that's really important, and I can help businesses to do that in a non-judgy way. I'm not perfect, you know. I get on a plane every now and then, and I don't want people to feel like all sustainability professionals go in there from quite a sort of perfection perspective, because none of us are perfect, and if we say that, we're going to get caught out. So I can help businesses with that, and then turn that into a plan of action. Also can speak to teams, because there's a lot of language we're hearing, especially in the last couple of weeks with COP. People just don't understand, and you get carbon neutral muddled up with carbon net zero, and it's very complicated. So I can just spend time explaining that. And I also do a bit of a stealth session for senior execs and that kind of cohort of people who really ought to know more about the subject, but until now that they just haven't engaged with it for whatever reason. And they're a bit like, you know, when you've met someone at a party and you've asked their name too many times and you just can't remember it. They're at that point with sustainability. So I can go in sort of under the radar with absolutely zero judgment, but to quickly upskill them so they start to understand the subject, so they can make more informed decisions. No judgment, just help and insight.
Brilliant. And lastly, what is your top eco tip?
So be clear on the language you're using is my, I'm going to do two, sorry, is the first one, because it is very confusing and you can set yourself up to get in a bit of a pickle. And then the main one is start with something small and achievable, feel good about it, celebrate the success. We all need to do something, and it's so motivating when you feel like you're not the only one trying to do whatever it is. So that would be my top tip.
Brilliant. And then, and as you say, if it's small and easily achievable, you can tick that off. It's a really good feeling. Yeah. So thank you so much, Jo, for joining us. Such a pleasure to have you on the show. Huge amount of tips in there. So people can go to your website, sustconsulting.co.uk.
Sustconsulting.co.uk, and we're on Instagram and all of that kind of LinkedIn stuff.
Yeah, brilliant. And there are more details as well for anyone who's watching live now or catching the replay. Do check out all the details in the description below. Subscribe, or you can sign up to the newsletter to have it delivered in your inbox. And thank you once again for joining us, and we'll see you same time next week. Thank you, Jo.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.